Beneath the front paws of the Great Sphinx of Giza, sealed for 4,500 years, there is a chamber. Not a theory, not a legend whispered by fringe archaeologists at the edge of credibility. A confirmed, mapped, scientifically documented void, detected at 99% confidence using technology that can see through 30 meters of solid limestone. Egyptian authorities have known, and they have said nothing. Stay with us. The Great Sphinx has stood at Giza for 45 centuries, through the rise and fall of empires, through Napoleon's cannons and colonial excavations, and the relentless march of modern tourism. It has kept one thing perfectly intact: its silence. Official Egyptology has maintained for decades that there is nothing beneath it. Solid rock, they said. No chambers, no tunnels, no secrets worth pursuing. The case was closed before it was ever properly opened. But new scanning technology doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't negotiate with institutional gatekeepers or defer to academic consensus. It simply looks. And what it found beneath those ancient paws has the potential to rewrite everything we think we know about the origins of human civilization. In 2023, Italian radar engineer Filippo Biondi published findings that stopped the archaeology world cold. Using synthetic aperture radar, a technology originally developed for military satellite reconnaissance, Biondi and his team mapped the subsurface structure beneath the Sphinx with a resolution and penetration depth that no previous tool had ever achieved. The radar waves pushed through more than 30 meters of Giza limestone, and what came back was not the uniform signature of solid bedrock. It was something else entirely. The scans revealed vertical shafts, tunnels, and at least 3 distinct enclosed voids positioned directly beneath and around the body of the Sphinx. These were not random anomalies. The formations were geometric, precise. The kind of precise that does not occur in natural rock fracturing, where stress lines follow the path of least resistance and produce irregular, chaotic patterns. These shapes had right angles, defined boundaries, internal structure. Biondi's team ran the numbers repeatedly, cross-referencing the radar returns against known geological baselines for the Giza Plateau. The confidence interval came back at 99%. In the language of empirical science, that is as close to certainty as the discipline allows itself to get. The data did not stay quiet. Within weeks of the findings circulating in engineering and archaeology circles, the story broke into mainstream coverage. Social media amplified it faster than any institutional body could contain. Forums lit up. Comment sections ran for thousands of entries. The footage of the scan visualizations, 3-dimensional renders showing the hollow spaces mapped beneath one of the most scrutinized monuments on Earth, spread across every platform simultaneously. And that is precisely when the dismissal campaign began. Several prominent Egyptologists moved quickly to characterize Biondi's methodology as flawed. The critiques were pointed. Some argued that synthetic aperture radar had not been sufficiently validated for subsurface archaeological mapping at this scale. Others suggested the geometric readings could be explained by natural geological layering specific to the Giza Plateau. A few went further, questioning whether the data had been peer-reviewed through the appropriate channels before being released publicly. The skepticism was loud, organized, and arrived with unusual speed for a field that typically moves at the pace of decades-long excavation permits. Author and researcher Graham Hancock, who has spent 30 years documenting what he calls the systematic suppression of anomalous archaeological evidence, weighed in directly. He described the response as a textbook example of what he terms premature rejection in science, the phenomenon where findings that challenge foundational assumptions are dismissed on procedural grounds before the underlying evidence is seriously engaged. Hancock pointed to a pattern he has documented across multiple sites in multiple decades. The critique of the method, he argued, was arriving before anyone had genuinely attempted to replicate or refute the result. That distinction matters. Questioning how a measurement was taken is not the same as demonstrating the measurement is wrong. And in this case, No institution with access to equivalent technology had stepped forward to run a competing scan and publish contradicting data. The counterargument was procedural. The data itself remained standing. What Biondi's scans had done was not merely produce an interesting anomaly. They had placed a specific, measurable, geometrically structured void in a specific location beneath one of the most famous structures in human history, and done so with a confidence level that in any other scientific context would be considered definitive enough to act on. The question was no longer whether something was down there. The question was why no one in an official capacity had moved to find out. Shortly after the scan data entered wide circulation, access to the scanning site was quietly restricted. No formal announcement, no press conference, no published explanation. The kind of silence that, once you notice it, becomes very difficult to unhear. 3 chambers confirmed beneath the Sphinx, a lockdown that followed the data release, and an official narrative that has not budged a single degree in response to any of it. What exactly are those chambers, and why does the answer seem to frighten the people who should be most eager to know? Here is what the 2025 muon radiography survey found. Not one void, not 2, 3 distinct chambers sitting beneath the forepaws of the Great Sphinx, stacked in the bedrock like rooms in a building no one was supposed to discover. That is the specific, documented result of a scan technology so precise it can map density variations through hundreds of feet of solid limestone. 3 chambers, confirmed, and one of them is unlike anything the geology of the Giza Plateau can explain. Muon radiography works the same way a hospital X-ray works, except instead of light photons, it uses cosmic ray particles that rain down from the upper atmosphere every second of every day. These particles pass through rock the way light passes through glass, and they slow down or deflect based on the density of whatever they move through. Detectors placed beneath the Sphinx recorded those deflections over months of continuous measurement. The resolution achieved in the 2025 survey exceeded 99% accuracy. That is not a margin that allows for misinterpretation. What the detectors recorded was really there. 2 of the 3 chambers register as consistent with natural cavities. Limestone bedrock at Giza is riddled with stress fractures and dissolution pockets, left over from an era when the plateau sat beneath a shallow sea. Those 2 chambers fit that profile. They are irregular. Their density signatures are uneven. Geology can account for them. The 3rd one is different. Measurably, undeniably different. Its walls read as near uniform in density. Its dimensions are consistent across multiple scan angles, which means it does not taper or collapse the way a natural void would. It sits at a depth and orientation that places it directly beneath the right forepaw of the Sphinx, angled inward toward the monument's chest. And here is the detail that should stop you cold. The density of the material surrounding that chamber is slightly higher than the surrounding bedrock. Not lower, higher. Which means whatever is inside that space, or whatever lines its walls, is denser than the rock around it. Natural cavities do not work that way. Now here is where the 2025 data becomes impossible to dismiss on its own terms. Researchers from Waseda University in Japan conducted seismic surveys at the Sphinx site in the 1990s. They were using ground-penetrating radar and acoustic resonance, completely different technology, and they flagged anomalies in the bedrock beneath the forepaws. Same location, same approximate depth. They published their findings, and then the site access was quietly closed to independent researchers. The 2025 muon survey did not find something new. It confirmed something that has been sitting in the scientific literature for 30 years while the official position remained unmoved. 2 independent methodologies, 3 decades apart. Same coordinates, same depth, same result. At some point, corroboration stops being coincidence and starts being evidence. So the question the data forces is this. If the anomalous chamber is natural, why does it have geometric regularity that natural voids do not produce? Why does its density profile suggest a constructed or lined interior rather than raw dissolved limestone? And why does it sit precisely where it sits, directly beneath the right forepaw, rather than anywhere else along the 440 feet of bedrock the Sphinx occupies? The science does not speculate. It measures. And what it measured in 2025 is a chamber that does not belong to the geology of this site. But the moment that data became public, something else happened. Something that has nothing to do with science and everything to do with who controls access to this site. And the person at the center of that response has been running this same playbook for decades. Zahi Hawass has been the most powerful gatekeeper in Egyptian archaeology for the better part of 30 years. Former Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, the man who controlled who dug, who scanned, and who published at every major site in the country. And his position on chambers beneath the Sphinx has never changed. Not once. Not in response to seismic data in the 1990s, not in response to ground-penetrating radar anomalies in the 2000s, and not in response to the 2025 Muon survey. His position is that there is nothing there. Solid rock. End of discussion. Here is what he actually did when the pressure mounted in the 1990s. He authorized 3 drill sites at the Sphinx enclosure, 3 locations where bore samples were extracted and analyzed. His conclusion from those samples was that the bedrock beneath the monument was unbroken and solid. No chambers, no voids. Case closed. Except the drill sites were not located beneath the forepaws. They were placed at the flanks and the rear of the enclosure, which is precisely where the anomalous chamber is not. You can drill 3 holes in a building and find no basement if you drill them in the wrong rooms. The methodology was not designed to find what the scans had flagged. It was designed to produce a negative result. And then there are the tunnels. Because here is what Hawass has never publicly addressed. There are known tunnel systems at the rear of the Sphinx, near the tail. They have been documented. They appear in survey photographs. Researchers who have visited the site have confirmed their existence. Those tunnels are currently restricted. Access denied. No excavation, no independent survey, no publication of what lies at their terminus. The official explanation for the restriction is preservation and structural stability, which is a reasonable explanation for closing a fragile monument to tourists. It is not a reasonable explanation for closing it to scientists with non-invasive equipment. The pattern here is not subtle. Independent data surfaces. There is a brief window of public excitement. An official denial follows, usually from Hawass directly, with a declaration that the site has been checked and found to contain nothing unusual. And then access quietly contracts. Permissions are revoked. Research teams find their applications delayed, denied, or simply never answered. That exact sequence played out again in 2025. Within weeks of the Muon survey results circulating in the research community, site access for the team involved was administratively revoked. No formal explanation was issued. The data was already published, so the publication could not be stopped. But the follow-up survey, the one that would have placed detectors in a second configuration to refine the chamber dimensions, that survey did not happen. It could not happen. The access was gone. Denial followed by lockdown. The same move, executed again. But here is the thing about this particular wall of denial. It did not begin with Hawass. It did not begin with the Supreme Council of Antiquities. The suppression of what lies beneath the Sphinx has a precedent that is older than the monument itself. If you believe a man who died in 1945 and who described the exact location of that chamber decades before anyone had the technology to find it. In the 1930s, an American mystic named Edgar Cayce made a specific claim. Not a vague prophecy, not an allegorical vision, a specific geographic architectural claim. He said that beneath the right paw of the Great Sphinx of Giza, there was an entrance to a hidden repository. He called it the Hall of Records. And he said it contained the documented history of a civilization that predated ancient Egypt by thousands of years. Casey described the entrance as a passageway oriented inward toward the body of the Sphinx, leading to a chamber that was not alone. He said the Hall of Records was one of 3 linked archive sites positioned around the globe, each containing a portion of the same historical record. He named the other 2 locations as Bimini in the Bahamas and the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. He gave these descriptions across multiple recorded sessions between 1932 and 1944. At the time, this was dismissed as mysticism. Casey had no academic credentials. He was a faith healer and a trance medium, and the archaeological establishment of the mid-20th century had no patience for psychic geography. The dismissal was total, and it was understandable. You cannot build a scholarly argument on channeled testimony. But then, the scans landed. The 2025 Muon survey placed the anomalous chamber beneath the right forepaw of the Sphinx, oriented inward toward the monument's body, at a depth consistent with a constructed rather than natural space. That is the location Casey specified. Not the left paw, not the flanks, not the rear enclosure where Hawass drilled his inconclusive bore samples. The right forepaw, inward, deep. The coordinates match, not approximately, specifically. Now consider what that means without invoking anything supernatural. Either Casey made a lucky guess about a very precise location 90 years before the technology existed to verify it, or he had access to some source of information, a text, an oral tradition, a document, that described what was already known to exist in that location. Ancient Egyptian priestly traditions did include references to a subterranean archive beneath the plateau. The Inventory Stela, a limestone tablet found near the Sphinx enclosure, contains language that some scholars read as referencing a structure predating the 4th Dynasty monuments above it. The tradition of a hidden repository at Giza did not originate with Casey. He may have been drawing on something far older. And here is what changes when you hold the 2025 data next to the 1930s testimony. The question is no longer whether Edgar Casey was psychic. That question does not matter anymore. The question is why a chamber with the precise characteristics he described exists in the precise location he named. That is not a metaphysical question. That is an archaeological one. The scan confirmed the chamber. The location matches the prophecy. The access has been revoked. So the real question, the one that every researcher who has seen this data is now sitting with, is not whether the Hall of Records exists beneath the Sphinx. The geometry, the density, the corroborating surveys across 3 decades all point in the same direction. The question is, what is inside it? And whether anyone with the authority to open it actually wants the world to find out. The Sphinx has guarded this secret for 45 centuries, but the scans don't lie, and the silence from those in power may be the loudest confirmation of all. Tell us below, what do you believe is waiting inside that chamber? Subscribe for the next revelation.